Hey, my name is Alex. I'm 26. 3 months ago, I dropped my drunk best friend home on a rainy September night, just like I'd done 100 times before. But when his mother opened the door in that silk robe, her blonde hair falling loose around her shoulders, everything changed. She thanked me for bringing Will home safe. But the way she said it, the way her fingers brushed mine when she handed me that cup of tea, the way she whispered my name in the dark kitchen while thunder rolled overhead. Later, as I was leaving, she caught my sleeve and said, "Don't tell anyone about tonight. About us." There was no us, not yet. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments. Because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I never thought a simple thank you could change everything. But that's exactly what happened on a rainy September night, when I dropped my drunk best friend home. And his mother thanked me in a way I'll never forget. My name is Alex. I'm 26, work construction, and drive a beat-up Honda that sounds like it's dying every time I start it. Will Whitmore has been my best friend since high school, back when I didn't know his family had money. Real money. The kind that builds houses with marble countertops and 3-car garages. It was our usual Friday night at Murphy's Bar. Will was already 3 beers deep when I walked in, his voice carrying over the noise of the jukebox and pool games. He was telling some story about work to anyone who'd listen, gesturing wildly with his 4th beer. "Alex," he called out when he saw me, "tell them about the time we—" I tuned him out and ordered a Coke. I always drove on these nights. Will never asked, just assumed. That's how our friendship worked. "Well, well," a familiar voice said behind me. "Look who's playing designated driver again." I turned around. Grace Martinez, my ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago. Still beautiful, still wearing that smirk that used to drive me crazy. "Someone has to," I said, nodding toward Will, who was now trying to balance his beer bottle on his nose. "You're a good friend, Alex," she said, touching my arm briefly. "Maybe too good." Before I could respond, Will stumbled over, nearly knocking into a table. "Grace, my favorite person who used to date my favorite person," he slurred. "Are you two getting back together? Because Alex needs to get laid." "Will," I said, grabbing his shoulder. "Time to go." He tried to protest, but his legs weren't cooperating. I half-carried him to my car, while he mumbled about how the night was still young. Grace waved goodbye from the doorway, shaking her head with that knowing smile. The rain started just as we pulled out of the parking lot. Those fat September drops that promise a real storm. Will dozed against the passenger window, occasionally muttering something about his parents. "They don't even talk anymore," he said suddenly, startling me. "Just exist in the same house." I'd been to dinner at the Whitmores plenty of times. I knew what he meant. Tom Whitmore would read his phone while eating. Claire would make polite conversation that went nowhere. Will would fill the silence with jokes that weren't funny. "Your mom tries," I said. "Yeah, she does." Will looked out at the rain. "Dad's always working. She's always, I don't know, waiting for something." The Whitmore estate sat at the end of Maple Ridge, behind iron gates that opened automatically when they recognized Will's key fob. The house was all glass and stone, lit up like a museum. Even in the rain, it looked perfect. Cold, but perfect. I pulled into the circular driveway and saw her silhouette in the front window. Claire Whitmore, watching for her son. She opened the door before we'd even gotten out of the car. She was wearing a silk robe over pajamas, her blonde hair pulled back, concern written across her face. "How bad is he?" she asked, hurrying down the steps with an umbrella. "Not too bad," I lied. Will was barely conscious. "Thank you for bringing him home, Alex. You're always so—" She paused, watching me support Will's weight. "So good to him." Mrs. Kessler's porch light came on across the street. The old woman appeared at her window, silhouetted behind lace curtains, always watching, always listening. "Let's get him inside," Claire said. The Whitmore house always smelled like lemon and cedar. Claire's perfume, I realized later. It hit me every time I walked through that door, but I'd never really noticed until that night. We got Will up the stairs to his room. He mumbled something that might have been thanks before face-planting onto his bed. Claire pulled a blanket over him and closed the door softly. "He'll be fine," I said. "Just needs to sleep it off." "I know, I just—" She touched her throat, a nervous gesture. "Tom's not here. Business trip. I worry when I'm alone and Will's out." We walked back downstairs together. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, counting seconds that suddenly felt important. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. "It's still early." It wasn't early. It was past midnight. But I said yes anyway. Her kitchen was all marble and stainless steel like something from a magazine. She put the kettle on and leaned against the counter, and for the first time I really looked at her. Not as Will's mum, but as Claire. She was 47, but she could have passed for younger. High cheekbones, green eyes, skin that spoke of good genes, and expensive moisturizer. Beautiful in that polished way that comes with money and careful attention. But there was something else. A tiredness around her eyes. A loneliness that expensive things couldn't fix. "Tom's briefcase is still here," I said, noticing it by the door. "His car keys, too." "He took a cab to the airport," she said quietly. "Didn't want to leave his car in long-term parking." The kettle whistled. She poured 2 cups of chamomile tea, and when she handed me mine, her fingers brushed mine. Just for a second. But we both felt it. Thunder rolled overhead. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. "I hate storms when I'm alone," she admitted. "Silly, I know. Not silly." We stood there in the kitchen, drinking tea and listening to the rain against the windows. She told me about Will when he was little, how he used to climb into her bed during thunderstorms, how he'd grown up too fast, trying to fill the space his father left empty. "You worry about him," I said. "All the time. He drinks too much, goes out with people who don't really care about him." She looked at me. "Except you. We've been friends forever." "I know, and I'm grateful, more grateful than you know." There it was, the thank you that changed everything. Not just words, but the way she said them, the way she stepped closer, the way her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Alex," she began, then stopped. A sound from upstairs. Will, probably getting sick. We both froze, listening. But then it went quiet again. Claire's hand moved toward mine on the counter, then pulled back. I saw her chest rise and fall, saw her lick her lips nervously. Car lights swept across the kitchen window. Tom's taxi, returning early. "Shit," Claire whispered. Then, louder, "You should go." I set down my teacup and headed for the door. She followed, walking close enough that I could smell her perfume again. Lemon and cedar. I'd never forget it. At the front door, she caught my sleeve. "Alex," she said, her voice barely audible. Don't tell anyone. About tonight. About what? About tea in the kitchen? About the way we'd looked at each other? About the moment her hand almost touched mine?" "I won't," I said. Tom's key turned in the lock. Claire stepped back, smoothing her robe, composing herself with practiced ease. I slipped out the back door as Tom entered the front. As I walked to my car, I saw Mrs. Kessler in her garden despite the rain, her little dog yapping at nothing. She watched me with sharp eyes and nodded once, like we shared a secret. I drove home with my heart pounding and my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The next morning I woke up, and the first thing I smelled was Claire's perfume. It was on my jacket, faint but unmistakable. I held the fabric to my nose and breathed it in. My mother was in the kitchen when I came down for coffee, reading the newspaper and eating toast. "You're up early for a Saturday," she said. Good night? Just the usual. Will got drunk. I drove him home. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You sure you're okay? You seem different. I'm fine, Mom. But I wasn't fine. I couldn't stop thinking about Claire, about the way she'd said my name, about the moment her hand almost touched mine, about the look in her eyes when she thanked me. My phone buzzed. Text from Will. Dude, my head is killing me. Thanks for last night. You're a lifesaver. No mention of his mother. No mention of tea in the kitchen or moments that lasted too long. To him, nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that made my chest tight and my thoughts scattered. I drove to the diner where Will and I usually had breakfast after his rough nights. He was already there, sunglasses on, nursing black coffee and looking like death. Never again, he groaned as I sat down. You say that every time. This time I mean it. He sipped his coffee and winced. Did my mom give you grief last night? She's been weird lately. Weird how? I don't know. Distracted. Asking questions about where I've been, who I'm with. More than usual. The waitress came over, and I ordered breakfast I didn't want. My stomach was too twisted to eat. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Grace. Hey, stranger. Want to grab dinner sometime? Feel like we should catch up. I stared at the message without responding. Grace was beautiful. Grace was available. Grace made sense. But all I could think about was green eyes and lemon cedar perfume, and the way Claire had whispered my name in the dark. You're being weird too, Will said, studying me over his sunglasses. Did something happen last night that I don't remember? Nothing happened, I said quickly. You passed out. I brought you home. End of story. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something I couldn't name and couldn't stop thinking about. After breakfast, I drove past the Whitmore house without planning to. Just happened to take that route home. Their driveway was empty except for Claire's white BMW. The curtains in the front window were drawn. But as I slowed down without meaning to, one of those curtains moved. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see a hand pull it back. Claire was watching for me. I drove home and spent the rest of the day trying to forget about her. Tried watching TV, tried calling Grace back, tried doing anything that would get the taste of chamomile tea and the sound of thunder out of my head. But at night, lying in my bed, I could still smell her perfume on my jacket. Could still feel the ghost of her fingers brushing mine. Could still hear her voice saying my name like a prayer. Some doors, once opened, can never really be closed. And that night, Claire Whitmore had opened a door I didn't even know existed. A few days later, Will called with a favor. His parents needed help moving some boxes from the basement to the attic. Heavy stuff. Could I lend a hand? I should have said no. Should have made up an excuse. Should have listened to the voice in my head telling me to stay away. Instead, I said yes. Mrs. Kessler was watering her flowers when I pulled up to the Whitmore house. She looked up from her garden hose and waved with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting for entertainment. "Morning, Alex," she called out. "Helping the Whitmores again." "Just moving some boxes." "You're such a good boy, always coming and going, helping out." She smiled, but there was something sharp in her eyes. "Young men like you are so helpful." The way she said it made my skin crawl, like she knew something I didn't want her to know. Claire answered the door wearing Will's old college sweatshirt over jeans. Her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked younger, more real. "Alex," she said, and there was that smile again, soft and grateful, and something else I couldn't name. "Thank you for coming." "Where's Will?" "Running errands with his father. They'll be back later." So it would just be us, moving boxes, alone in the house. I followed her down to the basement. It was cooler down there, away from the September heat. The boxes were labeled in Claire's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, Will's school papers, Tom's law books. "Most of these haven't been touched in years," she said, "but Tom wants them out of the way." We worked in comfortable silence, carrying boxes up 2 flights of stairs to the attic. On the third trip, both of us reached for the same box at the same time. Our hands touched. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. "Alex," she said. "Claire." We stood there in the dim basement light, our hands overlapping on the cardboard box, and the air between us felt electric. Then Tom's voice boomed from upstairs. "Claire, where did you put my golf clubs?" We jerked apart like we'd been burned. Claire's cheeks flushed pink. "Coming!" she called back, her voice slightly breathless. Tom was standing in the kitchen when we emerged, still in his golf clothes, looking irritated. "The clubs, Claire. I told Peterson I'd meet him at the course in an hour." "They're in the garage," she said, smoothing her hair. "Where they always are." He looked at me like he'd just noticed I was there. "Alex, good to see you. Thanks for helping with this." "No problem, sir." Tom grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. Claire walked me toward the front door, but slower than necessary. "Thank you," she said when we reached the foyer, "for helping today." She touched my forearm as she said it. Just a light touch, barely there, but it burned through my shirt sleeve. "Any time," I managed. Tom's car started in the garage. Claire's hand lingered on my arm for one more second, then fell away. I walked to my car in a daze. Mrs. Kessler was still in her garden, deadheading roses with the focus of a surgeon. "Finished already?" she asked. "Yeah, all done." "Claire seems happier lately," she said, snipping a bloom with unnecessary force. "Must be nice having young people around to help." There was that tone again, like she was fishing for something. "I should go," I said. "Of course, dear. Drive safely." But as I pulled away, I saw her in my rearview mirror, standing in her driveway with her pruning shears, watching me go. That night, I dreamed about Claire, about her hand on my arm, about the way she'd said my name in the basement. I woke up sweating, my heart racing, the smell of lemon and cedar so strong I thought she must be in the room. But it was just my imagination, just the memory of her perfume clinging to my clothes, my skin, my thoughts. Grace called while I was having breakfast. "Alex, you've been dodging me." "Sorry, work's been crazy." "Uh-huh." She paused. "Want to grab lunch today? I have something I want to talk to you about." I almost said no, but something in her voice made me hesitate. "Sure. Where?" We met at a sandwich shop downtown. Grace looked good, wearing a sundress that brought out her eyes. She'd always been beautiful, in that warm, accessible way that made sense for someone like me. "You look tired," she said after we ordered. "Thanks. You really know how to make a guy feel good." She didn't smile. "Alex, what's going on with you?" "Nothing. Why?" "Because you've been acting strange since we ran into each other at Murphy's, distracted, like your mind is somewhere else." I focused on unwrapping my sandwich. "I'm fine." "Is it work? Money? Another girl?" The question hung in the air between us. Another girl? If only it were that simple. "There's someone," I said finally, "but it's complicated." "Complicated how?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't say that I was falling for my best friend's married mother. Couldn't admit that I spent my nights lying awake thinking about a woman I could never have. "She's just not available." Grace studied my face with the intensity she used to reserve for solving crossword puzzles. "Alex," she said gently, "whoever she is, be careful. You're a good guy. Don't let someone unavailable break your heart." But it was too late for that warning. My heart was already breaking, one stolen glance at a time. 3 weeks passed, 3 weeks of trying to forget about Claire Whitmore and failing miserably. Every time my phone rang, I hoped it might be her. Every time Will mentioned his parents, my pulse quickened. I was losing my mind over a woman I'd spent maybe 2 hours alone with. Then Will called with another favor. "Game night at my place tonight," he said. "You in?" I should have said no. Should have stayed home and watched TV and tried to get my head straight. Instead, I found myself pulling into the Whitmore driveway at 8 o'clock, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. Claire answered the door in dark jeans and a cream sweater that made her skin glow. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she smelled like that perfume that haunted my dreams. "Alex," she said, and her smile was different now. Warmer, like we shared a secret. "Will's setting up the Xbox. Go ahead up." As I passed her in the doorway, she touched my shoulder briefly. Just a whisper of contact, but it sent electricity through my entire body. Will was in the living room, surrounded by game controllers and empty beer bottles. Tom sat in his leather chair, reading emails on his phone and barely acknowledging my presence. "Finally," Will said. "I've been waiting to kick your ass at this new racing game." We played for 2 hours. I lost every race because I couldn't concentrate. Every time Claire walked through the room, my focus shattered. She brought us snacks, refilled drinks, made small talk with Tom about his upcoming business dinner. But I felt her watching me. Felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. At 10:30, Tom stood up and stretched. "Early meeting tomorrow," he announced. "Peterson wants to go over the Morrison contract before we present to the client." He kissed Claire's cheek absently and headed upstairs. She watched him go with an expression I couldn't read. "I should head out too," I said, standing up. "One more race," Will slurred. He'd been drinking steadily all evening. "Come on, man. Don't be a pussy." "Will," Claire said sharply. "Language." But Will was already passed out on the couch, controller still in his hands, snoring softly. Claire looked at him, then at me. "He's been doing this more often." "Drinking?" "Everything. Drinking, staying out late, avoiding responsibility." She sighed. "Tom says it's normal for his age, but you're worried." "I'm always worried." She started gathering empty bottles and plates. "Help me clean up." We worked together in the kitchen, moving around each other in a dance that felt too intimate for what it was. When she handed me dishes to dry, our fingers touched. When I reached over her to put glasses away, I could feel her breath on my neck. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times. "Tom's asleep," she said quietly. "He never stays up past 10:30 when he has morning meetings." "I should go." But neither of us moved. We stood facing each other across the marble island, the dishwasher humming between us, and the air felt thick with everything we weren't saying. "Alex," she began, then stopped. "I keep thinking about that night, when you brought Will home. Claire, I know it's wrong. I know it's impossible. But I can't stop thinking about it." She was close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could count her freckles, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Neither can I admitted. She reached up and touched my face, her fingers tracing my cheekbone with feather-light pressure. I closed my eyes and leaned into her touch. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Yeah." But crazy felt right. Crazy felt like the only sane thing in a world that suddenly made no sense. A sound from the living room. Will shifting in his sleep. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Claire's hand flew to her throat. "He's waking up." But Will just rolled over and kept snoring. "I have to go," I said. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "I know." At the front door, she caught my hand. "Alex, wait." She disappeared for a moment, then returned with something in her fist. When she pressed it into my palm, I felt silk, her scarf, the one she'd been wearing the first night. "I don't know why," she said. I wanted you to have something." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just nodded and walked to my car, with her scarf clutched in my hand. Mrs. Kessler's light was off, but I could swear I saw her curtain twitch as I drove away. At home, I sat on my bed, holding Claire's scarf, running the silk through my fingers. It smelled like her, lemon and cedar and something uniquely Claire that made my chest ache with want. I was in love with her, completely, hopelessly, impossibly in love with my best friend's married mother. The next few days passed in a blur. I texted Claire simple messages. "Hope you're well. Thinking of you. Sweet dreams." She didn't respond. Will seemed oblivious to the tension crackling around his family. He complained about his hangover, made plans for another night out, asked if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner. "Mom's been quiet lately," he said. "Dad's being more of a dick than usual. Maybe you can lighten the mood." But I couldn't face sitting at their dinner table, pretending everything was normal while Tom carved roast and Claire poured wine, and I died a little more each time she looked in my direction. "Rain check," I said. "I'm not feeling great." It wasn't a lie. I felt sick with want, sick with the impossibility of it all. Grace called that weekend. "How's your unavailable woman situation?" she asked. "Complicated," I said, which was the understatement of the century. "Alex, you know you can talk to me, right? Even though we're not together anymore, I still care about you." I almost told her everything, almost spilled the whole mess about Claire and the way she'd touched my face and the scarf I kept hidden in my dresser drawer. But what could Grace say? What could anyone say that would make this easier? "I know," I said instead. "Thanks, Grace. Just be careful, okay? Don't let someone destroy you who can't be with you anyway." Too late for that advice, too. The following Tuesday, I was at the grocery store when I saw Mrs. Kessler in the produce section, squeezing tomatoes with the focus of a scientist. "Alex," she called out, waving me over with a cucumber. "Just the person I wanted to see." Every instinct told me to walk the other way, but she'd already cornered me between the lettuce and the onions. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "About the Whitmores." "What about them?" "Oh, you know how neighbors talk. And I've been noticing things." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of things?" "Well, you've been spending a lot of time over there lately. And Claire, she seems different, happier, more alive." She studied my face like she was reading a map. "It's wonderful to see young people helping out older folks, but sometimes people get the wrong idea." "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't, dear." She patted my arm with mock sympathy. "I'm just saying, appearances matter, especially in a neighborhood like ours. People notice when a young man visits a lonely housewife, when her husband's away." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, because that's what we looked like from the outside. That's what Mrs. Kessler saw when she watched from her window. "It's not like that," I said. "I'm sure it's not, but perception is reality, isn't it?" She smiled sweetly. "Just thought you should know that people are starting to talk." I left the store without buying anything, my hands shaking as I started my car. Mrs. Kessler knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. And if she knew, how long before the whole neighborhood knew? How long before Tom knew? That night, I dreamed about Claire again. But this time it was a nightmare. Tom discovering us together. Will's face when he found out. Claire crying as her perfect life crumbled around her. I woke up in a cold sweat and decided I had to stay away from her. For her sake. For everyone's sake. But the universe had other plans. The next evening, my phone rang. Claire's number. "Alex." Her voice was shaky. "Can you come over? Tom's out of town and Will's being arrested. My heart stopped. What? DUI. He's at the police station downtown. I need someone to pick him up and I can't drive right now. I'm too upset. I'll be right there. I found Claire in her kitchen, pacing back and forth with tears streaming down her face. She was wearing pajamas and a robe, her hair messy from running her fingers through it. They called an hour ago, she said. He hit a mailbox. No one was hurt, thank God, but his license is suspended, and he has to spend the night in jail, and I don't know what to do. I reached for her without thinking, pulling her into my arms. She collapsed against my chest, sobbing quietly while I held her, and whispered that everything would be okay. I'm a terrible mother, she cried. I should have seen this coming, should have done something. You're not terrible. Will's an adult. He made his own choice. Tom's going to be furious. He's been waiting for Will to screw up so he can cut him off financially. I held her tighter, breathing in her familiar scent. Even upset and scared, she felt perfect in my arms. We'll figure it out, I said. All of it. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Why are you so good to us? To me? Because I love you, I wanted to say. Because holding you feels like coming home. Because I'd do anything to keep you safe. Because you matter to me, I said instead. She reached up and cupped my face in her hands, studying me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Alex, she whispered. And then she kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was asking permission. But when I kissed her back, she melted against me with a small sound of surrender that nearly broke my heart. We stood there in her kitchen, kissing like teenagers, like people who'd been waiting their whole lives for this moment. Her hands tangled in my hair, my arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. We can't, she said, but she didn't move away. I know. This is insane. I know. If anyone found out, I know. But neither of us cared about logic or consequences or the 1,000 reasons why this was impossible. We only cared about the way it felt to finally stop pretending. Tom comes back tomorrow, she said. I know. And Will is fine. He's safe. He'll learn from this. She nodded, tears still clinging to her eyelashes. Stay with me tonight. Just stay. I don't want to be alone. I should have said no. Should have walked away before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But the look in her eyes, vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once, made the decision for me. Okay, I said. I'll stay. We didn't sleep together. Not the way you're thinking. We sat on her couch in the dark living room, her head on my shoulder, my arms around her, talking in whispers until the sun came up. She told me about her marriage, how she'd been 19 when she met Tom, impressed by his success and confidence, how they'd been happy for a while, before the money and the pressure and the different ways they wanted to live their lives drove them apart. We're roommates now, she said, polite strangers sharing a house. I told her about my family. My father who died when I was 16, my mother who worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, how I'd never felt like I belonged in Will's world of country clubs and trust funds. You belong here, she said, tracing patterns on my chest with her finger. With me. As dawn broke through the windows, she fell asleep in my arms. I watched her breathe, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell across her face, knowing this might be the only time I'd ever hold her like this. At 6:30, I carefully extracted myself from the couch and wrote her a note. Went to get Will. Back soon. A. The police station was a blur of paperwork and attitude. Will looked like hell, hungover and ashamed, barely making eye contact as we walked to my car. Mom's probably freaking out, he said as we drove home. She was worried, but she'll be okay now. Dad's going to kill me. Your dad loves you. He'll be angry, but he loves you. Will was quiet for the rest of the drive. When we pulled into his driveway, Claire was waiting on the front steps, still in her robe. She hugged Will tightly, then looked at me over his shoulder with eyes that said, "Thank you and goodbye, and I love you all at once." "I'm going to shower and sleep for 12 hours, Will said. "Thanks, man, for everything." Claire walked me to my car. "Tom lands at 3, she said quietly. "He'll want to deal with this as soon as he gets home. Will's going to be fine." "And us?" I looked at her standing there in the morning light, beautiful and sad and completely out of reach. "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Alex, last night was perfect. It can't happen again." "I know." But we both knew that wasn't really up to us anymore. Whatever this was between us, it had its own gravity now, its own rules. "Some doors stay cracked," she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. Then she turned and walked back into her house, and I drove away with the taste of her kiss still on my lips. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. Will got a lawyer, started attending AA meetings, threw himself into making amends. Tom was furious but ultimately supportive, seeing his son's crisis as an opportunity for growth. Claire and I barely spoke. When I came by the house, she was polite but distant, professional. Like that night on her couch had been a dream. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me when she thought no one was watching. And sometimes, when I drove past their house at night, I'd see her silhouette in the window. Mrs. Kessler made a point of saying hello every time she saw me. Always with that knowing smile, always watching. Grace took me to dinner and gently broke up with me, even though we weren't technically back together. "You're in love with someone else," she said, "and before you deny it, just know that it's written all over your face." "Grace." "I hope she's worth it, Alex. I hope she makes you happy." But happiness felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when loving Claire meant risking everything she'd built. Not when being with her could destroy her marriage, her family, her life. 3 months after that night, Tom and Claire hosted a small dinner party. Old friends, colleagues, the kind of gathering that looked perfect from the outside. I was invited because I was Will's friend, part of the family. Mrs. Kessler was there too, holding court in the living room, sharing neighborhood gossip with anyone who'd listen. Tom was in rare form, telling jokes and playing the perfect host. But I could see the strain around his eyes, the way he watched Claire when he thought no one was looking. Claire moved through the party like a ghost, smiling and chatting and playing her part. But every time our eyes met across the room, I felt that familiar electricity. After dinner, I was helping clear dishes when Claire brushed past me in the hallway. As she did, she pressed something into my hand. A folded piece of paper, warm from her touch. I slipped it into my pocket and didn't read it until I was in my car, driving home through the December cold. "Tonight, porch light on at 2 a.m. if you want to see me. I understand if you don't come. C." I sat in my driveway for an hour, staring at that note, knowing I should tear it up and forget about it. Knowing I should choose the safe path, the logical path, the path that wouldn't destroy everything. Instead, at 1:45 a.m., I found myself parked down the street from the Whitmore house, watching for a light. At 2:17 a.m., the porch light flickered on. I walked to her door with my heart hammering against my ribs. She let me in without a word, leading me to the kitchen where this had all started. We sat across from each other at the marble island, just like that first night. But everything was different now. The air between us crackled with months of suppressed longing. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said finally. "Claire, I know it's wrong. I know it's impossible. But I'm drowning in this life, Alex. And you You make me feel alive again." She reached across the counter and took my hands in hers. Her skin was soft and warm and trembling slightly. "Tell me you feel it too," she whispered. "Tell me I'm not crazy." "You're not crazy." "Then why does this feel like the first real thing that's happened to me in years?" We talked until sunrise, holding hands across the counter while the house slept around us. About dreams we'd given up. About the people we might have been in different circumstances. About the impossible mathematics of love that don't care about age or marriage or social conventions. As the first light crept through the windows, she squeezed my hands one more time. "I should go," I said. "I know." But neither of us moved. We sat there as the sun painted the kitchen gold, memorizing each other's faces, knowing this might be the last time. Finally, she walked me to the door. On the threshold, she stopped and looked back at the house that was her prison and her protection. "Some doors don't close all the way," she said, "and some goodbyes aren't meant to last forever." Then she handed me her scarf, the same silk scarf from that first night, and closed the door softly between us. I drove home through the empty streets, her perfume on my clothes, and her words echoing in my head. Some doors don't close all the way. That was 6 months ago. I still drive past her house sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet. Sometimes the porch light is on. Sometimes the curtains move in the upstairs window. Will's doing better. He's been sober for 4 months, started dating a nice girl from his AA group. Tom travels less, making an effort to be present. Their family is healing, slowly but surely. And Claire. Claire waves when she sees me, smiles when we talk. We're careful now, polite. We don't touch, we don't text, we don't meet in midnight kitchens. But sometimes when I'm helping Will move boxes or staying for dinner, or just passing through their lives like I always have, I catch her looking at me with those green eyes. And in that look, I see everything we were and everything we could never be. Mrs. Kessler still watches from her window, still makes pointed comments about young men and lonely housewives. But her power over us has faded because we've learned to live in the space between wanting and having. Some love stories end with kisses and wedding bells and riding off into the sunset, but the best ones, the ones that matter, live in the quiet moments, in stolen glances and silk scarves and doors that never quite close all the way. I love Claire Whitmore. I always will. And someday, when the circumstances are different, when the risks don't outweigh the rewards, maybe those doors will open again. Until then, I carry her scarf in my glove compartment and drive past her house on nights when I can't sleep. Until then, I remember what it felt like to hold someone who saw me, really saw me, for exactly who I am. Some doors don't close all the way, and some goodbyes aren't meant to last forever. Want to share your own forbidden story? Comment below. Subscribe for more confessions that will make your heart race.